often do you drive this?
A lot. So I limit myself to about 1,000 miles per year. This car has 56,000 original miles on it. This sat in Jim Wenger's collection for 30 years. This was part of his collection of cars as he got older, where he wanted to have some of the unique cars that he had influence on. His favorite was the 1969 GTO. And
the Judge,
The Judge. And the 65 was in close second. Well, Jay, we've talked a lot about how much goes into the Royal Bobcat kit, and somebody asked Jim Wengers along the way, hey, how much does this Royal Bobcat kit cost?
Right.
Well, he said it's cheaper than the disappointment of second place.
Oh, that's funny. Welcome to an episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today we're being visited by automotive royalty, and it really is, because this is a 1965 Pontiac GTO Royal Bobcat edition. What does that mean? Well, you'll find out from the young man who owns this car. This was the dream car when I was 14 or 15 years old. Although there were other cars that were technically supercars, this is the one people think kind of got the whole ball rolling, the Pontiac GTO. It started out as Le Mans, and then at first it was an option package. You could get the 389 engine. See, here's the way it worked. General Motors had a rule: you couldn't have any engine bigger than X in the middle, to sort of this bodied car. Big engines went in big cars, smaller engines went in smaller cars. And John DeLorean, who was running Pontiac at the time, got around it by, if you went and checked a couple of boxes, you could get the big engine in the smaller car, and that's what this was. 64 was the first year. 65, they knew they had a hit on their hands, so they started doing the wheels and whatever, and then by 66, it became a package on its own. The thing I love about this, the young man that owns this car, he is currently serving in the United States Air Force. See, when I was a kid, you went into high school. After high school, you win the Air Force, you saved all your money. When you got out of the Air Force, you bought this car, you bought this GT. I knew so many service guys. Some went to Nam, some didn't come back, sadly, but they all wanted a muscle car or a Hemi or whatever, and this was one right at the top of the list. And this young man is, he's not that old, actually. He's only about 40 years old, but he's like the third generation, I'd be right? Jordan Smith. Jordan, come on in here.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me on your show.
And you're still currently serving, right?
I am. I'm in the Air Force. I'm a lieutenant colonel. All my friends call me Joker, though. That's my call sign. I tell bad jokes.
Right. So it's not Joker, though. It's Joker.
It's Joker.
So
yeah, that's
Joker,
right.
though, would be maybe philosophy as opposed to
yeah.
But you remind me of when I was your age, I knew guys like you, and when they would in the service, they would dream about this is what was going to happen. As soon as they got back home, they go see their parents, and then they go to the dealership and pick up the car they ordered before they left for Nam, wherever it is, Korea, wherever they were going. And yeah, it is a beautiful job. You've restored this yourself?
I had a lot of help. We were up in South Dakota when I first bought this car, and two of my great friends, Bonnie and Christine, she goes by Chris, helped me restore this. We worked on it for days, months, leading up to a PCS, a permanent change of station, where we were moving from South Dakota to Texas.
Right.
And I would work hours on this in the garage at night because we were working shift work. And one of the funny stories is I was trying to get the fenders off, and I'm working by myself, like, how do I do this? Well, I'm looking around their garage, and they have a wooden ladder. And I'm okay, I'm gonna use that, put the wooden ladder across the two fenders, and then, okay, I need to lift the hood up somehow. So I got some extension cable. I went up in the rafters, hung the whole thing up, and then eased it down, put some zip ties to get just enough clearance to get the fenders off. Right. They woke up the next morning, they opened that door, like, oh my, what, Joker, what did you do? I can't believe you did this, but it worked.
It sounds like an accident waiting to happen.
It was. Don't tell OSHA.
Yeah, that's exactly. Okay, now, are you a career?
I am. I've been in the Air Force for 17 years.
Okay.
And Jay, I have to put a disclaimer out there. So I tell such bad jokes that the Air Force says, Joker, you need to put a disclaimer. You tell such bad jokes.
Right.
But really, I'm just here by myself, not representing the Air Force. So all the opinions expressed are just of my own.
Right.
There'll be more in the description, but I'll try to stay away from those bad jokes.
All right. Well, no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. So why the GTO? Was it, I mean, you're about 40 years old, correct?
40 years old.
This car was long gone by the time you got your driver's license. So why this far back? Why not the 2000s or the 90s?
So growing up, I went to a boarding school for troubled youth, North Central
For
Texas.
troubled youth, that's my
Troubled
favorite
youth.
term, for troubled youth, yes.
I found my way, but along there, we went out with what we call our foster dad, Doc. And Doc would take kids out on these Sunday visits, and we go to town, get a meal, maybe watch a movie, just get us away. And Doc had all of these beautiful cars, and my favorite was the 1965
Okay.
GTO. He had a
That
Fontaine
explains
blue, light blue interior. And so over the years, just like you said, I saved up my money while I was in the Air Force, and I finally had enough to where I could maybe go buy the car from Doc. So I contacted him and said, hey, Doc, do you still have the GTO? And he had sold it.
Ooh.
He had sold it, and so he lost track. And so I'm searching on the internet, and I'm going to give you a secret for your audience. Here's how you find a really good car. So you go to the internet, you find your search engine.
Right.
You reduce the filter by only things that show on the last 24 hours. So you're the first to see things. And that's how I actually came across this car. And I saw the advertisement. It was on Craigslist.
Right.
And it was a guy in Arizona. He had it listed. I called him up and said, is this really a Royal Bobcat? Did Jim Wangers, the godfather of the GTO, really own this? I said, yeah, it really is. So it's like, I'm really interested in buying this. He says, yeah, but I've already got a couple offers on it. I said, well, if I buy a plane ticket, would you give me first chance? He's like, yeah, sure, I guess you're pretty serious. So I hang up, and then I make the hardest call to my wife. Poor Andrea, she's like in an airport somewhere. And I say, hey, you know, I've been looking for Doc's car. I found this really special one. And she says, well, Joker, you can buy a plane ticket and go see. So I got my foot in the door.
Okay.
And so I took last minute leave. I flew to Arizona, met the guy. It was what he said it was. Called Doc and it kind of explained the whole thing. Like, this is a really special car, Doc. I know it's not yours, but it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Doc says, absolutely, get this car.
He didn't know where his was anyway.
He
right?
didn't,
Right,
exactly.
okay, yeah.
So we bought the car. I had to fly back to South Dakota, and I had to fly a mission the next day because I fly remotely piloted aircraft. So we're flying from the States, flying these MQ-9 Reapers.
Drones.
Drones, yeah, exactly. Most people know them as drones on the other side of the world. So one day I'm buying my dream car, and the next day I'm flying missions in Afghanistan.
Now, your wife is Andrea, right?
Andrea,
Okay,
she's great.
you were the home for troubled boys. Now, was she at the home for wayward girls? Is that how you got together?
Not
The
quite.
troubled boy meets the wayward girl?
We met at Texas A&M.
Oh, okay. So she wasn't.
She was way smarter than me. She was starting her master's as I was finishing my bachelor's. So
Okay.
yeah, I married up, Jay.
How long have you been married?
We've been married since 2007.
Oh, okay. Good
So
for you.
quite a few
Congratulations.
years.
Great. Now, is she a car enthusiast? Does she like these things?
She's actually embarrassed now that she can tell the difference between cars. She was not the
that's
car enthusiast, but over the years she's kind of picked up on some of the things.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Any kids yet?
No kids,
No
but we
kids.
have a four-legged dog, Rex.
Yeah, well, actually, you know, most dogs are four-legged, actually.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
that unusual. Maybe in Texas.
It's true.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
a three-legged dog. You
Maybe a
call him
three-legged
IHOP.
dog, yeah. Let's get back to the car. You buy it sight unseen. You see, you're like I always tell people, don't buy something you haven't seen. Don't do this.
Right.
Is it a real Bobcat? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Does it have- oh, yeah. So, well, the guy said it had it, so it must be true. But it turned out to be true, didn't it?
It was a rare find. So, I mean, for somebody like me, I'm just some random joker. To have this car with this provenance, it's a special thing.
Yeah. So let's tell people exactly what the provenance is. Now, Royal Pontiac was a dealer out of where in Michigan?
It was in Royal Oak, Michigan.
That's right. Royal Oak, Michigan. That's right. Royal Pontiac. He would have been like Don Yanko or what other dealer? Tesco out of Rhode Island that did the Fords. There were
Exactly.
back in the day. You don't see it much anymore, but they were dealers who build special packages to compete with other dealers. You had to have something special. So a lot of dealers were performance oriented. So Royal Pontiac, they would take GTO. Sometimes they put a 421 engine in it, or the
Yeah.
421 heads, or make it as crazy because there was no reason you couldn't back in the day. It says Royal Bobcat there. And these were just an engine, really. There weren't a lot of suspension. You didn't have disc brakes. You had four-wheel drum brakes. A young person driving one today would go, what was all the fuss about? But back in the day, cars were just slow. And this seemed incredibly fast. It had a 4-speed. When most cars came with a 3-speed. So if we had that extra speed. You had that extra speed. I mean, you know, most cars were automatic. You know, it was really an exciting automobile, and Pontiac played it to the hilt. They had a tiger tail you could have sticking out of the gas tank. You know, all this kind of goofy stuff, which just made it a lot of fun. I think the hood scoop was fake, but then it became, he would open the hood scoop up, right? Yeah.
He did, Jay, and to get back to where it all started was 1959. That's when Jim Wangers approached Ace Wilson at Royal Pontiac and came up with the idea of a performance dealership. Now, you've heard of performance dealerships where they race on Sunday and then try to sell on Monday.
Right.
Well, it never really quite translated. Royal did it the better way. They educated their sales personnel to be smart about the performance parts and understand, oh, do you want it for a highway kind of drive, or are you a street enthusiast where you might run with another car? Right. And they would make
street racing. I like street
racing.
Yeah, street
enthusiasts.
Yeah.
So they would tailor it to each individual, and that service that was kind of to educate and learn from the racing and translate it to the racing enthusiasts in the Pontiac dealership was really what made Royal so successful. And it started all the way back in 1959.
Prior to 59, Pontiac was kind of the division of General Motors. It didn't really fit in. Chevrolet had Corvettes, Cadillac cars top of the line. There really was, these were businessman's coupes, you know. Right. If you're a salesman, you load your stuff in the trunk and you put the big 6-cylinder in, you got good gas mileage. And then John DeLorean became president of Pontiac Motor Division. And he invented the wide track, so the Bonneville, 59 the first year. So then they became the performance arm of General Motors. That was their hook. Cadillac was the big car, Chevrolet was the car for the family, Pontiac was the car for the enthusiasts. So this was really an exciting automobile. Jim Wangers became, quote, the PR guy for Pontiac. I think DeLorean saw, well, here's a guy, a salesman who's really knowledgeable. Because still, exactly. I remember my dad and I went to look at a car once, and it was, the guy said it's got a transverse engine, makes it faster. My dad said, well, why would you try and make it, why is it faster? Well, because it's transverse. There's no, you know. So Jim Wangers was a guy who could talk performance numbers. Young guys like yourself, you're coming out of the service, want some testosterone-fueled automobile. He knew how to talk about it. And so he became sort of the official demonstrator for Pontiac. When anybody wanted to do a story on a Pontiac GM, go see Wangers, and he could talk without embarrassing the company and getting all the facts wrong. Yeah. And
Royal really got its start and moved into the main light in 1960. So they started Royal Pontiac with the performance in 1959 with the partnership. And then within a year, Jim Wangers won the National Hot Rod Association Superstock in 1960. And that really put Royal Pontiac on the map.
That was the 421.
The 421.
Because this engine went from 326, then it went to 389. And then, you know, you always see it with the tri-power, but tri-power was never, it never left the factory with tri-power, correct? Every car left with a 4-barrel. Now, if you want a tri-power, you ordered it, and the tri-power unit would be sent to the dealer, and it would be a dealer-installed option. But you never got one from the factory with the 389 tri-power. Is that correct? I think it is.
So you could actually get it from the factory with the 389 if you ordered that part, and that's what Royal would help you do is make sure you had all those check marks labeled so you got the performance parts when you got at the dealership. So you could either get it from the factory, from the dealer if they happen to have one, or you could get it over-the-counter parts.
Because a lot of dealers didn't want to deal with performance because you got a lot of tire kickers. People can't afford it, want it. People want it, can't afford it, you know. So that's why that happened. Let's open the hood and show them what this system looks like here. I always thought this was the sexiest setup. Even more so than 2 4-barrels. I like this.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
So the first thing you'll notice, Jay, is that we open up the hood scoop in the front. And then they put a ram air pan to keep really the hot air out. And that effectively lowered the temperature by about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So you get more colder, denser air going into the engine. And then moving down, they might put a less restrictive air filter in there to get more airflow. And then we changed the carburation to a manual linkage. Now what that meant was most of the time as you're driving around, as long as you don't go more than halfway in your throttle, you're just operating off that center carburetor. You're saving gas back in the 60s. And so what Royal noticed is that as you made that transition from the single carburetor to the end carburetors, it would buck and spit as it tried to get the fuel and air mixture correct. So they richened up the center carburetor, leaned out the outside carburetors to make it more even, and more of a seamless transition as you get to the 3 carburetions.
So these never came with heat risers, right?
So what they would do is they would block the heat riser with a gasket and prevent that hot air from coming up into the intake manifold.
Right. Well, see, in old cars, in the wintertime, you start it up and your car is cold and it's got to be the truck. The heat riser would allow heat to heat the carburetor up so the fuel atomizes. You know, there's something called a Bernoulli effect. When gasoline goes through a venturi, it causes it to freeze. Oh. And that's how you ice up a carburetor. Sometimes you go 100 degrees, why is there ice in my carburetor? Because it's gasoline being forced through the venturi and it ices up. So that's what the heat riser do. But this being a performance car, you know, you don't want any of that. No.
Exactly.
No.
And speaking of things you don't want in your car, we took off the vacuum advance on the distributor.
Okay.
Put in some different spring tensions on there so you advanced the timing, gave a little bit more air, more fuel. In addition, you would have a problem with the pump up of the hydraulic lifters. And
right.
The solution they came up with was on the stud nut, they put it with a different one that would kind of take up that slop. And you might go with a stiffer spring on your valves, put some shims in there, in a sense, get it closer to solid lifters.
Well, it's funny because so many things now you just take for granted. Like most guys that do this, you're a purist, but they would put a modern electronic ignition and would just eliminate different springs and all this kind of nonsense, you know. But it's fun to see it as it should be. And of course, nothing more dangerous than a single master cylinder. Yeah, that's the way they came. Modern cars, you have a dual master, which means if your front brakes go out, oh, you still got your rear brakes, or vice versa. You know, this, if your brakes go out, you brake. That's it. That's it. Brakes are over. Thank you very much. This is why insurance is so expensive in these cars. You know, modern cars are so good because they're not only fast, but they handle, they stop, they go around corners. These were just fast. They didn't really handle or stop.
Not at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. But just fantastic.
Continuing down, they might shim the heads as well, going down to 35 thous to get that compression increased a little bit, or they might put in a thinner head gasket.
Right.
With the copper, it was 17 thous, just a little bit more to increase the compression. They went so far as to, on the spark plugs, they changed it from AC to Champion, and they went to a little bit smaller gap to get a cooler plug in there so you don't have the pre-ignition.
Right.
But they would take off the gaskets just to get that little bit more of compression.
And you had the gas that could handle it.
You could.
See, the idea is when you make it thinner, you make the combustion chamber smaller and smaller, so the explosion is, boom, that much bigger. But you had gasoline like Sunoco 260,
270,
270, just crazy octane numbers, filled with lead. I mean, people literally, you go down the street and people are falling down like Night of the Living Dead behind you from these things. It was just unbelievable how bad the emissions were around them. But yeah, this is one reason why supercars kind of died out, because they didn't know how to deal with the emissions. They would lean these all the way out to pass emissions. I mean, I remember that Corvette in the early 70s had the big block was a 454, 180 horsepower. It's just fun to see this exactly. This is exactly as it would have left the factory. There's your plate there. Oh, you got a modern battery. You're not going to can't deduct for that.
Yeah. One more thing, Jay, is the fan here was something they would replace. Now, this one is a limited slip fan here, but they would replace it with the 4-blade, a little bit lower pitch. So again, those little things added up to an overall horsepower increase. One by itself might not add up to something significant, but together, that's what made the performance.
So this fan with the more blades, it'll run cooler, but it's more
parasitic drag.
Yeah, parasitic drag. Yeah, okay. It doesn't declutch above 40 or anything.
Correct.
That's what would happen now. The fan would just declutch in there, or be electric. Yeah.
So you put all this together, Jay, and you got about a 40 or 50 horsepower gain. So the car, as the tri-power setup, would start off at 360 horsepower. So now you're pressing up to 400 horsepower, and you're the king of the street on Woodward Avenue with the Royal Bobcat.
Did we do all the chrome and everything?
It came like this. What we did on our restoration is basically from the firewall forward, we took all the pieces out, powder coated them, and this is all up in South Dakota. So I'm out in a little shed with the giant kerosene heater shooting in there, and I got so cold once I put my foot in front of the kerosene heater and I said, watched it as the shoe began to melt. I'm like, oh, it's time to go in. And my foot's still cold.
There you go. And it has the 4-speed. Now, it didn't come with a Hurst shifter, did it?
They came from the factory.
Bobcat put it on, or the factory?
From the factory. They came with
Maybe in '65, yeah. '64 it didn't.
Correct.
Yeah, but George Hurst made a fortune because factory linkage was just awful, and his was so smooth, and everybody had a Hurst shifter. You had to have that. Here, let's close this up. Here we go. And you got the original stickers. Now, those are cool.
Yeah.
It says fan. Yeah.
Careful.
Careful. I like the wheels. They're meant to look like a mag wheel.
So one fun story about the wheels, Jay, is she has 4 drum brakes all around. And we had a air show in San Antonio, and I talked to some of the people that were putting it together and convinced them to have this car next to the MQ-9 at this air show. And it was a 3-day air show. So they put the car in the hangar, and I would follow this little follow me truck across the airfield. And the second day they stopped, and I pulled up next to them. I said, you know, why'd you guys stop? Like, well, hey, do you want to go racing on the runway? And I'm like, you're kidding, right? Like, no. And he brought up the radio. He's like, I'm talking to Tower. Let's do it. All right. So we pull out, and I'm banging through the gears, and I get it in 4th gear, pushing a $120 at Kelly Air Force Base. This thing's like 11,500 feet long.
Right.
And I'm having the time of my life. And I'm remembering, like, wait a minute, Kelly Air Force Base has an arresting cable. And I start looking for it, like, oh no, there it is. And so I'm on the brakes, downshifting, and I barely get stopped in front of this cable. But then the follow me truck goes right over it. And luckily nothing caught. And then we turned around and went racing back the other way.
We had kind of a similar thing with the U-2 pilots. The U-2 plane went up, and they had Dodge Chargers. The wingspan was so big, it would do this coming in. So we had to spot it to let them know, oh, the wings almost touching down. Be careful, whatever they did to kind of keep it stable, because it was huge. It's amazing how long it was. But we were running, it would come in, and we'd run about 120, 130, and then just get alongside and just ease it in until it stopped. Yeah, so that was really exciting. That's the great thing. There's so many companies that do the original upholstery, and you get exactly as it was.
That was one of the things we found while we were doing the restoration, Jay, was that as we took the seats apart, we noticed that there was this extra spring in there. It was a circle spring, and we're like, this is kind of odd to be in here. We called it the Wanger spring. He just needed a little bit extra spring for his seat.
The Wanger spring. Hey girls, how'd you like to see the Wanger spring? Ow! Now, is that dash package, was that aftermarket, or is that original too? Did that come with that?
The 3 gauges inside are aftermarket, so we can keep a better eye on the oil temperature and some of the things that you just need to keep an eye on as you're driving.
Yeah, everybody did it. You went down to Pep Boys, whatever the thing was, and you bought the optional gauges to show that you're a racer, you know about your car, you know how to do all that. Because this is the age of the idiot light. The light came on, if your oil light come on when you were out of oil. Well, that's not really that useful. Thanks, guys. You know?
Right.
But yeah, I always thought those things were cool.
And I love the simplicity of the design as well, Jay. You'll notice the turn signal is just a simple chrome lever.
Right.
And there's one light in the middle just to let you know your turn signal is on. You know, you think about lights today, you have the left arrow and the right arrow. Well, you know which way you turn the blinker on. You just, it's simple.
And also, the thing I like, no console, just a stick coming out of the floor. Because once they started selling these, you know, we can make money selling useless accessories. Like I've got a Dodge Challenger. It's got 2 sheet metal screws at each end holding this console. Just the most poorly built factory. You can do this, but it's got, you know, it's got a glove box in it, but it rattles, and this is so much cleaner. Very nice. Locking. Oh, and a grab rail. I don't think they had that. Was the grab rail standard on the?
The grab rail was standard.
On the GTO, but not on the regular.
Correct.
Yeah.
You just need something to hold on to.
Because of that speed. Yeah, there's something to hold on to there. Let me ask you a question. Does it seem fast to you compared? I mean, you probably have friends that have Hellcats and all that kind of thing.
It's a blast drive. And I had a chance to drive Doc's 1965 GTO, so I have the comparison of both, and this is significantly faster and more responsive, really. You have the low-end torque, and you have a few more revs on the high end.
So now, were you at the Home for Wayward Boys with something to do with automobiles?
So, no, this was just kind of Doc's enthusiasm about old cars that got me into this.
Oh, okay. That's fair. And just a regular steering wheel, you know. Then it went to the sport, the phony wood wheel and all this stuff.
Right.
I just like the purity of this. Just whatever you need to make it go faster. I love that it's a post car, meaning this right here, because, you know, everybody liked the free-flowing, look like a convertible.
Right.
But this really gave you a rigid chassis. It worked almost not like a roll bar, but certainly
Exactly.
it made it a little more secure and less rattle.
And it was less weight too, Jay, because you had that rigidity. You didn't need as much weight on the top of the hood.
Very nice.
And the roof. So it made it lighter. It was a lighter version of the car, even though not many people liked the design.
In the dash, you had a tachometer, which
Yep.
you did, which was not unheard of in American cars, because even Duesenberg had it back in the day.
Right.
It just disappeared in the 40s. In the 50s, Chrysler would put it in the transmission tunnel. So you go like this. Am I shifting? You'd have to look down. Up, down! You know, so the coolest thing Pontiac ever did was put the tack on the hood right here. I've got a
Right.
Firebird. Now, to me, that's the greatest thing, watching it from outside the car. It's really neat, really neat.
And that Firebird is amazing, Jay. And with Royal, they would make performance kits for anything. So
Right.
even that Sprint 6-cylinder that you have in your Firebird, Royal made an upgrade for it.
Yeah,
And-
well, that has the that's called the Firebird Sprint. But the trouble is, by the time you upgraded to 6, you had more money invested in than a V8.
Right.
And in 1968, why would anyone buy a 6 when you could get a V8? It just didn't make any sense, you know. But very cool.
And while we're talking about the interior, you probably remember the ads from back in the 60s and 70s where they had the Tiger.
Right.
And there was a story where the Tiger, were trying to coerce it into the interior of the car, and it was just getting mad, and eventually it had enough, and it just tore up the whole place. And there's nothing they could do. They just watched as this Tiger absolutely destroyed the interior of this.
That's hilarious.
And they asked the handler, the lead handler, like, what happened? He's like, well, it just got pissed.
Anything special in the trunk? Can we take a look?
Yeah, there's a couple dead bodies back here.
Let's
I
see
think.
what we got. Look at that, an actual spare tire. Thank you very much. Roads are so bad here in California. I had my Ford GT out, the latest version of it. I was coming home from a nightclub gig. Boom, blew a tire. I got to call a flatbed. The flatbed comes, no, we can't tow this. It's too expensive. It's too, what? I mean, it was like a nightmare. You know, Tesla, same thing. Tesla Plaid, thin wall, boom, you blow a sidewall, you know, 3 times. And all you can do is flatbed it. There's no spare, you know. So it's just fun to have a car where you can actually change a tire on it. So very nice.
These are the split exhaust on the side, which I always
Oh,
thought
that's
was
right. Yeah, that's
classic
right.
look.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, good. Just on that side, right? Not both sides.
Both sides.
Oh, both sides. Okay. That looks great, actually. I like that. That's great. Because thinking, why is it coming out the back? Why aren't they? Okay.
And Jim Wangers, you know, took his liberty to make a couple other additional. He couldn't leave well enough, so he put 3-inch exhaust all the way back, had Doug headers on it.
Wow.
And he actually also took the engine and milled it 60 over, so it's closer to a 400 now.
Yeah.
So Jim Wangers still had his tricks even
And
in
this
his own
was
collections.
his actual car, right? This is his, quote, demonstrator for Royal Bobcat, so to speak, right?
This was in Jim Wanger's personal collection for over 30 years. In his later life, he started collecting the cars that he really appreciated, enjoyed. His favorite was the '69 Judge. He had a lot of influence on the marketing and implementation of the '69 Judge, and that was his favorite. But the '65, he used to say famously that the '65 GTO was everything with the '64 that was wrong fixed.
I remember the '69 had the Enduro bumpers on it.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I don't like that. I still like this better than that. I'm not a big fan of the rounded. I didn't like it when, I like the old Oldsmobile 442 body when it was this sort of square shape as opposed to the kind of half circle kind of look at the, yeah, I prefer this to the '69. I'd rather have this. I think this is more fun.
I agree. And Jim Wangers was really a marketing renegade genius. He was brilliant on how he marketed. He came up with things and put it in advertising such as buy one or get one before you're too old to understand.
Right.
Oh, that hurts. It makes you want to go buy something.
Right. Get the old guys out there. Well,
Exactly.
they always say you can sell an old man a young man's car. You can't sell a young man an old man's car.
It's very true, and it holds true today.
But you never got to meet Jim, huh?
I met him
Oh, you
once.
did?
I met him once, and though he had one question for me. He said, "Joker, have you got your foot into it? Have you gone full throttle on him?" And I told him that story about how we took the car out on the runway,
Right.
and he was ecstatic.
Oh, that's great.
He was ecstatic.
So, well, that's good. At least he knows it went to a good home.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice. Well, can we take it for a ride?
I say we do it.
I'm very excited to drive this. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let me.
Well, you really get that clunk on the door.
We get the second clunk. Clunk. There you go.
You hear that, Jay?
I hear that.
That's the sound of freedom.
Sound of freedom. And it does have power steering. Because, you know, most performance cars, if you bought the Hemi, you didn't get power steering. These feel like 323 gears. What are they? You know what the rear end is?
355.
Oh, it is 355.
It's a nice balance between
Yeah.
fast and economy.
Well, it's got plenty of power.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that thing goes good. It goes very good. Yeah, very nice.
My favorite part is that transition between one carburetor and three.
Yeah. On modern cars, everything happens so fast. You almost don't have time to enjoy. You go, I'm in jail. What happened? What 140? What are you? You know, I enjoy watching the tank make that long sweep across the dial. You know, I mean, there are always going to be cars that are faster, but not more fun. This is really the era when it was so different from everything else. Everything is fast now.
Exactly.
Even grocery getters have 300 horsepower, you know. Whereas in these days, having over 300 horsepower, that was like huge. Oh my God.
And Royal Pontiac really got it right. They knew the difference between performance and racing. You know,
Right.
Your average guy didn't want a race car.
Right.
They just wanted something that was fast, had that response, something that could be
Gotcha.
competitive on the streets, but not overwieldy, where you couldn't control it. It was just too much, too loud. So Royal really knew how to market to that clientele of automobile enthusiasts. One of the interesting things too about Bobcats is how the name came about.
Right.
So Jim Wangers was sitting around one day and he had a Bonneville and a Catalina. And you remember they had the letters on the back spelling out the name. And he was messing around with the letters and he took the first two letters from Bonneville and the three letters from Catalina and he came up with Bobcat.
Oh, I see.
And so that's how the Bobcat name came
that's
about.
interesting, isn't it? You know, I like that era when there was always one person associated with an automobile. In Ford, it was Carroll Shelby. For Chevrolet, it was Don Yanko Stinger.
Right.
You had Jim Wangers from Pontiac. There was always a guy who was the guy. Yeah, this feels very nice. What do you have for shocks on it? Stock shocks? Or?
Stock shocks, you could get an increased stiffness on the shocks. It was a special order to somewhat help the handling, but it was never really a cornering car. It was meant for going straight. And that was where all the fun was. When I first saw my foster dad, Doc's GTO, I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
The straight body lines.
What color was it?
It was a Fontaine blue.
Oh, okay.
So a light blue, light interior, and it had air conditioning. And the most unique thing about it is it had power windows.
Wow, that's a rare option.
It was very rare.
Did it air condition with tri-power?
Air conditioning with tri-power.
Well, that was not, you couldn't get that. That was in fact.
It was special order.
Wow.
It is a beautiful car. And although we lost track of it over the years, we actually found the VIN number on it.
Oh, where'd it wind up, do you know?
We don't know. And Jay, I don't know if you want to put it in the comments section down below, but maybe one of your viewers has the GTO and maybe we could link up. Although it's kind of like a dog chasing a car. I don't really know what I would do if I ever did find it.
Right. Well, hey, if you know where that car is, just put it in the comments section here under this. Just put it in and we'll check it out.
That'd be
But
great.
you know what's so funny? Texas is like New England. When you grow up in a small town, there's always a guy with the car or a car. And it's never something like a Lamborghini or anything like that. It's always like a Chevy with two 4-barrels, a 283 or a Corvette that's really fast, you know. A Corvette, when you come from a small town, might as well be a Lamborghini. You know, it's just that exotic because everything,
Right.
where I lived, anything with less than 4 doors might as well be a sports car. And then my buddy Mark, his dad bought a 283 64 Chevrolet Super Sport. I think it had the 2-speed automatic. we're like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Wow, this thing is crazy, man. It's so fast, you know. Because it's your point of reference, you know. Just so funny.
And as you get to know these people, you might not know their name. It's just the Corvette guy.
Yeah, he's the Corvette
He's the
guy.
Corvette
That's right.
guy.
Yeah.
And Jim Wangers, they would go out to the street and challenge other cars, and they had a rule that they would never go out and go against somebody they weren't planning to go against.
Right.
Well, there was a Corvette guy, and he had this yellow Corvette. This was in '67, and they broke their rule. They decided to go against a 67 or '68 yellow Corvette,
Yeah.
and they lost.
Wow.
And it absolutely ruined their night because they had won their first match and they lost the second. So they said, well, we need a rematch against this. So they set it all up, and of course, in classic Jim Wangers style, he had a trick up his sleeve.
Yeah.
So they had two identical '67 GTOs. One was an automatic and one was a stick.
Right.
And they would meet at the burger place and then check out the cars, raise the hood, and then they would go to the point where they're going to meet up and have the competition.
Right.
Well, between the burger place and the competition, they switched out the cars because they were identical.
Right, right.
And so now Jim had a stick shift, which was about a half a second faster, and he won the race.
That's funny.
And they had broke another rule. They put money on the race. They put $200 on this race. So when the vet guy showed back up, and this is the best part, Jay, he said, here's your $200 back. Come by Royal Pontiac. We'll fix this thing up for you and make it run faster. It was the ultimate insult to this guy.
That's funny. That's funny.
But that was classic Jim Wangers style. He couldn't. He had to have that persona, that reputation on the street, that just put a mystique around Royal and the performance there.
Plus, street racing was like a wink and an eye. Hey, take it easy, wink. Nowadays, no, you street race, you're dead.
Yeah, exactly.
They crush your car.
Yeah, go on a racetrack. You don't need to be racing on the street. There's ways to do it. It's safer for everybody involved.
Australia, they do crush your car.
They will.
Yeah. Now I noticed here, what kind of watch you got there?
So this is a G-Shock watch. And
Oh yeah, the G-Shock. Yeah.
I love this watch because it automatically syncs to the time in Colorado. And with the military, right, we have to be precise on all the timing and everything. So I've actually bought 3 of these watches. I've loved them so much.
Well, they're very reasonable, aren't they?
They really are.
Yeah. Then, you know, that's what's great about electric watch. I mean, I like manual. This is a Chrono Swiss. Let me show you this thing. I think it's just a beautiful watch. But it's what they call a skeleton. You can see through see all the works of it. And it's a chronograph. I think Chrono Swiss was the first chronograph skeleton watch that anybody made, actually. And it's very accurate. You know, I time it against my iPhone because that's the most accurate. You're not going to get any mechanical. But you know, after a month, it's within 2 or 3 seconds. It's very good. So there you go. So check it out. Chrono Swiss. And they look cool.
They really do. So Jay, after they got back from some of these nights on Woodward Avenue, it was not uncommon to see GTO being upgraded with the Royal Pontiac kit right next to the police cruiser.
Right.
So the police couldn't catch these guys, so they went to Royal Bobcat, and there'd be a police cruiser and the GTO that was out the last night cruising on Woodward Avenue, right there side by side, both getting upgrades at Royal Pontiac.
Make money from both ends. Well, you know, Woodward, I don't know if people know that Woodward was the first paved street in America ever.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And Henry Ford and everybody used to test their cars on it, you know. And every year they do the Dream Cruise. I've been to it the last 2 or 3 years. And it's great because it's free. You know, Pebble Beach is nice, but it's thousands, and you stay in a hotel. And with Woodward, everything's free, even the food if you're driving something cool, you know, because I was driving one of the new Demon 70s before they go, hey, Jay, take a bratwurst. No, thank you. People just cooking by the side of the road. And the cool thing about the Woodward cruise, it's 30 miles long. So you go through, oh, this looks like Pontiac country, it'll be all GTOs. Then you come to Hemi country, and then it'll be, you know, but you just keep driving and driving. It's all people along the side of the road. And it's really kind of neat. It's a fun event.
The perks of being a comedian, you get free hot dogs as you're driving.
Free hot dogs. Oh, it kicks in. There you go. Very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. Now see, I know there's modern stuff that's faster, but this gives you that visceral thrill. Like modern cars, 100 feels like 60. I mean, 60 feels like 100. And that's where the fun is, you know? I always say all the fun's between 40 and 120. If you're going more than 120, you're just going to jail.
Exactly.
You're losing your license for a year. You're just screwed. Whereas this is the kind of thing you can just have fun. And you know, I know this power steering it's not rack and pinion or anything, but you know, it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's good, and it's very easy, because I've got a 66 Hemi Coronet, no power steering, no power brake. You're like, I mean, just, yeah, I mean, it's a killer. You know, when I got that car, it had the 3-speed torque flight, and that was the first transmission that was faster than a 4-speed. I remember reading in the magazines, oh, can shift faster than a human. No way, no way. It didn't seem possible. You know? So when I got it, I drive and I go, and it's not shifting. I would shift it. I'd take my foot off and shift it by hand, you know. Finally, I was talking to a Hemi guy, and they go, hey, how's your car? I said, you know, it's great because it's the only solid lifted car, but it doesn't shift. The guy goes, where you hitting? I said, like, it's $6,000. He goes, just keep your foot in it. I go, well, I don't want it. Just keep your foot in it.
Okay.
All right. I go, I'm going, oh, it was shifting at like 7,200. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I was like, gee.
If you can believe it, I learned how to drive a stick shift on my foster dad's 65 GTO.
Oh, wow.
I was so scared. I was just a kid growing up, and here's this beautiful 1965 GTO, and Doc trusted me enough to teach me how to drive a stick shift.
Oh, that's great.
And the GTO. I'd hit a gear and grind it like, oh, wait.
Is Doc still alive?
He is.
Yeah,
he's still in Dallas.
How old is he?
So he's in his 70s now.
Oh, he's my age.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So he must get a kick out of this car, huh?
He loves it. When we got done with the frame-on restoration, Bonnie and Chris helped trailer it down to Texas, and Doc was the first one to drive it.
Oh, yeah.
That was a real special moment for both me and him.
Oh, that's great.
Because we always remembered in driving and cruising in his 65 in Dallas, Fort Worth area. And then to have him experience the Royal Bobcat, it was really a special moment, Jay.
Yeah, no, that is great. You know, that's another fun thing about growing up in a small town. You really appreciate something because it's so rare. Having this in a small town, you're like king of the town.
Yeah.
You know, whereas in LA, oh, it's just another fast car.
Right.
There's always some rich kid who's got something even faster. When you come from a small town, it's like, oh, you're the guy. You know.
Right.
I remember we'd go uptown, we'd wait all day at the McDonald's all night. Let's go home. We go home with the phone. Oh, you just missed it, a Corvette. No, a Corvette came in. We didn't get this. Because, you know, back in those days, there was no internet, even car magazines. You could only see the new cars when the fall issue came out.
Right.
And now you go on the internet and you see everything whenever it happens. But you just wait for that. Ooh, you know, to see what the new Corvette's going to look like or what the new GTO is going to look like. Well, those secondaries open. That's really great. Woo.
I was having a lot of fun in the Black Hills up in South Dakota, coming down from Mount Rushmore, and all of a sudden I lost power. And long story short, it turned out to be the eccentric went bad for the fuel pump.
Oh, yeah.
And I opened up the fuel pump and I just see it dangling in there.
Oh.
But to me, that's part of the enjoyment of having these old cars.
Right.
You learn how they work. You know, something breaks, and you learn how to fix it.
Did you put an electric fuel pump in it, or did you just fix the old one?
Just fix the old one. Yeah, but to me, it was, you know, I got to take the front end off, see how everything goes together. And that's part of the enjoyment of owning these
and your
classic
wife
cars.
gets to sit in the car while you're fixing it. Yeah. That's right.
She's learned to bring books with us on these trips.
Yeah, exactly. My wife always brought a book. Because I said, honey, go to Amish country. You're going to look at the foliage. Because I'm really going to see a motorcycle there, you know. So we're just like in a barn the whole time. He's old man.
Well, Jay, we've talked a lot about how much goes into the Royal Bobcat kit. And somebody asked Jim Wangers along the way, hey, how much does this Royal Bobcat kit cost?
Right.
We said it's cheaper than the disappointment of second place.
Oh, that's fun. How much did it add?
So it varied in cost, and there was actually a catalog that you could get. So you could either have components installed at Royal Pontiac, and they would install it for you, or you could order it through their catalog and they'd mail it to you.
Now, did Royal Bobcat, did that void the factory warranty?
It did not. So it retained the factory warranty.
You mean you could change a cam and everything and the warranty still applied?
They backed it up because they had the professionals at Royal Pontiac that would have the expertise to set it up correctly.
Because when you bought a 66 Hemi, you got a 90-day warranty. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And if they heard you with a drag strip with it, boy.
Yep. But that's what made Royal Pontiac so great. They were supporting the enthusiast.
Right.
And they put a warranty behind it to show that they meant that they knew what they were doing.
Did they survive all the way up to the final demise of Pontiac, or did they go down in the 60s or 70s?
Royal Pontiac started going to the way where they weren't going to be relevant again, and really just Pontiac in general, when they started chasing the other manufacturers.
Yeah.
Early on, Pontiac was setting the trend, and they were out in front leading, but then as the years passed, Pontiac would be reactionary in some of their design.
Yeah.
And they really lost favor because of that.
The Solstice and some of those
Right.
little cars. They weren't bad little cars, but yeah.
The Aztec left something to be desired. Aztec was...
Oh, the Aztec, yeah, a horrible thing that was.
Jay, did you ever go to Woodward Avenue when you were younger?
Now, when I was younger, I've been in the last couple of years. You know, I had a Chrysler Turbine Car, and the engine melted down on it. So we found 60 guys from the original team, all over the age of 80.
Oh, wow.
And they agreed to build me a new engine if I would just pay for parts. They'd do the labor for free. And they did an amazing job. I mean, nothing existed. We had to make everything. And they were just unbelievable. Them and Williams Turbines out of Detroit.
That's a dying breed. Those guys are getting older now. So
I know.
It's important to capture that knowledge.
No, they're not getting older now. They're getting what comes after older. I mean, you're talking the early 60s.
Well, if you're asking them, they're becoming legendary.
Right, yeah.
And I don't know if I mentioned it yet, Jay, but I also helped shoot photography for Linkage, and that's one of the things I like about Linkage magazine is that they capture these stories of this generation and share it with everybody. It's a fantastic magazine. I think you have an article that you write.
Yeah, I write a column for them, yeah.
So Jay, Jim Wangers really was an influential part of Royal Pontiac and Pontiac in general, and later in his years he became affectionately known as the godfather of the GTO because he had such an influential part of it.
Right.
And some of the things that spoke to his, they were analyzing what kind of advertising they were wanting to change up, and they were going to remove advertising from a particular magazine. Well, the magazine got wind of it and said, Jim, you can't remove Pontiac advertising. Well, why did you say that? Well, if you remove your advertising, all the other guys are going to remove their advertising because they're watching so closely on what you do.
Right.
That they think if you're leaving our magazine, you know something they don't. So the guy ran the advertising for free just to have Pontiac advertising in that magazine.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
That's how successful Jim was at marketing.
Yeah.
And he was just an absolute genius. The Y-Track Pontiac. When the Y-Track started having issues going through the car wash because the tracks were too wide, they just didn't fit in the tracks.
Right.
He used it, and he traded it and marketed it as we're making a new car, so much so that they don't even fit in the car washes, and it was marketing gold.
How often do you drive this?
A lot. So I limit myself to about 1,000 miles per year. This car has 56,000 original miles on it. This sat in Jim Wangers' collection for 30 years. This was part of his collection of cars as he got older, where he wanted to have some of the unique cars that he had influence on. His favorite was the 1969 GTO. And
the Judge, yeah.
The Judge. And the 65 was in close second. So from the outside, Jay, there's not really much to tell you that this is a Royal Bobcat. You just have those small emblems on the back quarter.
Well, it says Royal Bobcat right on it, yeah.
And then the hood intake. Driving around today, not many people knew about it. But when you were in Woodward Avenue, everybody knew what a Royal Bobcat was.
Well, when I I was a kid, even the kids who knew nothing about cars pretended to, because cars are such a big part of the social scene. You know, the Beach Boys and songs, Little GTO and Spring Little Co. The songs are about cars. You know, nobody does that anymore.
Right. Jim Wangers was so proud of the Little GTO song.
Right.
He helped in that making of it. Jim Wangers sang that word for word at one of the gatherings. It was an amazing experience to see him sing that. I watched it on a video. And he was just such a good car guy, through and through, just a genuine guy. And I think that's what made him such a good marketer.
So funny.
In his early days, would go down to Daytona when they still raced on the beach. And he would capture a lot of that racing information and bring it back to Detroit. And that's how he got started. He actually worked for Chevrolet in the early days to help sell some of these parts that nobody else really knew about.
So he was born in the 1920s, huh?
Yeah, in the early days.
Well, Joker, thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate
welcome.
that. And thanks for your service.
You're welcome,
It's
Jay.
great. Always great having military people on, you know. A lot of car people and military people is fun. We do a lot with veteran stuff, and we can't thank you guys enough. And thanks for being a lifer. It's good to have smart people protecting us. Thanks again, my friend.
Well, thank you, Jay.
All right.
And thank you so much for sharing the automobile experience with all of us.
Oh, yeah.
On behalf of all the car fans around the world, Jay, thanks so much for what you do.
That's the way, I like the way Texas guys say automobile.
Automobile.
Automobile. That's all right. Thank you, my friend. Meanwhile, let's put our foot in this thing.